Hello and welcome to our latest webinar, NEC4 Enhanced Trust and Collaboration Through Effective Assurance. With me today we've got Phil Joyce, a very nice black and white picture there, Phil, with their tie and jacket.
Very moody.
Very moody, very moody. Phil is the Director of Chartered Accountants, the Orange Partnership, who've sponsored this event. Those that haven't done these webinars before, there is a question panel on the on your screen, so please do fire in questions whenever you can. We'll deal with as many as we can as we go through the presentation. Those who can't, we'll follow up with questions and answers after the event. I'm Rob Gerard, the NEC User Group Secretary and NEC4 Drafter, as it says in the colour picture on there. So, without further ado, what we're going to cover today is what NEC4 is doing to enhance collaboration through basically direct measures and perhaps some measures to build trust. Also, Phil's going to tell us about how effective assurance can enhance trust and cooperation. Very good things, very topical questions and points. So, over to you, Phil.
Thanks, Rob. So basically, the NEC4 has made some changes in evolution as much as anything else, and included direct measures aimed at enhancing collaboration. I just wanted to touch on those for a little while, and talk about how they can actually sort of move things on in a collaborative environment. So why collaboration? I guess you would ask. What's the point of working collaboratively? Well, in my experience, when you've got two parties working together collaboratively, it has a number of good effects. Basically, if things go wrong, and I've seen this, where things don't go quite as expected, or there's an issue or a problem, then a collaborative relationship enables the parties to get together to deal with that issue in a sort of an adult-to-adult manner, where they can work together, deal with the thing and fix it. And we certainly saw some examples of this at the Terminal 5 project when we set the business up. I think also it gives the parties an opportunity to work together to achieve their goals, maybe reduce costs by working together to find more effective ways of combining. I don't think you need to collaborate on everything. If you're building a shed and you've built 1,000 sheds before, it's probably less of an important issue. But where you've got a major program, a complex set of works, then it becomes, I think, vital.
Okay, so collaboration. So you see, collaboration is important. So without collaboration, we haven't exactly got nothing, but we've got less of a chance, if you like, to fulfil each other's objectives.
Well, absolutely. You're looking at a different way of working then, which is the old-fashioned sort of more aggressive, confrontational way of dealing with things.
Which on balance, we're more used to and prone to, and is part of our DNA for I don't know how long as an industry.
Absolutely, culturally. So yeah.
So attempting to wean ourselves off an adversarial approach towards a collaboration approach. I'm often asked for a sort of statistics that proves that collaboration works. Any thoughts on that? So there is no piece of paper that I've seen, but you say, look, it works because. Any ideas on?
No, I can't give you any specific statistics, but sort of anecdotally, where we've worked across a number of sectors with some major programs over the years now, and where these collaborative relationships work well, then they tend to work for both parties. The client gets what they want, at the right price with the right quality at the right time, and the contractor meets its needs for margin, for cash flow, and from the kudos of doing a good project.
Yeah, I always think it's almost like a gut feeling thing. It's right, it makes sense, it works, but actually can you prove it saves 1% or 2% or whatever is quite difficult. But maybe there's an opportunity there for academic research or something on that sort of topic.
It would be interesting. Don't look at me because I'm not at all academic.
Okay.
I went to a good school. It was approved.
It was one from Her Majesty's finest, I understand. But hey, you got out and you didn't find that. So
good stuff.
Okay.
So there are basically a number of points I want you to pick up on NEC4, where NEC4 is looking to enhance collaboration. And the first of those is contractors' proposals. Now, under NEC4, a contractor could propose a change to scope to reduce costs, which is new. And if the PM accepts the proposal, then they can issue an instruction. Now, for options A and B, the prices are reduced by applying a value engineering percentage, which is 50%, that's otherwise stated, of the total saving. And for C and D, the prices aren't reduced, so the cost savings are shared by applying the gain share, the pain share, whatever. So this is intended to get contractors to come forward with good ideas, even under a fixed cost arrangement, which may actually drive this sort of collaborative behaviour, so that we can save some money here to our mutual benefit. So that's one aspect. Now, my view of this is it's showing the right idea, but in some respects, I think it's going to work better on options C and D contracts, where you've got that transparency of cost and the benefit is more obvious. On an option A or an option B style contract, then contractors, they can be doing it again, find smarter ways of working, better procurement of subcontractors, whatever, and they may not want to reduce scope. They may be making a better margin by doing whatever they're doing beneath the fixed cost.
Okay, so the words I'm focused on here is reduced cost. I mean, just to say that for options C and D, these measures were already actually in NEC4, but weren't called contractors' proposals. They were tucked away in the sort of main option, where that exact same arrangement still apply, but I quite like how it's drawn into the core clauses with different rules for options A, B, C and D. But the emphasis of reduced costs, so we're trying to reduce costs by changing the scope and the scope prepared by the client generally, but wouldn't it be good if we could actually focus from a client's perspective on reducing costs of the contractor somehow as well? Why is it always...
Well, this is working both ways, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, if the contractor's cost is reduced on an option C or an option D, whatever, then you are going to get that mutual benefit from the whole thing. And that's the root of collaboration, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, on this, I think it's a great idea from NEC4, but there are wider things potentially. Clients could recognise who they want to work with, what sort of who's a perfect supplier, and recognise that some suppliers are strategic to them, and then create a wider relationship. And we've seen clients who have gone into option A and B contracts and got open book clauses just to say, well, not to claw any money back, but to say, well, how is this working for you? Is this a sustainable relationship?
Okay, so this is just one clause that sort of underpins collaboration, I suppose, is the point.
So another example is the clause about early warnings. So this is where the project manager prepares an early warning register within 1 week of the starting date, and then you have regular early warning meetings to actually sort of discuss these issues. And I think change and where things don't go quite to plan are a real test of a collaborative relationship. So, where it's working well, the parties will work together to deal with the change, to solve the issues. I mean, the worst examples, you can say, oh, well, you've got an aggressive client who tries to knock back all the change. Thinks the contractor's being contractual, or alternatively, the contractor using change to create a sort of position, if you like, and recover their commercials. But I think this is useful because what it does is change the language. It talks about early warning notices, or early warning meetings, early warning registers at NEC4 rather than risks. So what I think it's trying to do is put that emphasis on working together to deal with issues rather than waiting for the risk to become a fait accompli. And it also talks, I think, about making sure that issues which have been previously discussed, the actions are still appropriate. And also a really good idea is to bring in subcontractors. So if a subcontractor is impacted by a change issue, then the contract encourages that, and obviously they can influence decision making around that.
Again, you used the word adult earlier, which is one of my favourite words of mine. But expectation is people act as adults, and they don't put themselves first. They put the project first, and they come up with solutions to fix the problems or the issues that arise in a timely fashion.
But there is self-interest in all of this. If you want to find a contractor, I want to make margins, I want it to be paid, I want my cash flow. So making sure the contract runs smoothly, good project program management is all part of that.
Okay, let me interrupt with a couple of questions. So first one actually is a point, not so much a question, but we asked about statistics on collaboration. The US Construction Industry Institute, University of Texas, back in the 1990s, looked at hundreds of projects. Those with collaborative arrangements had significant advantages, including 10% lower cost, 20% faster, fewer claims, and much safer. In addition, supply chain made 25% more profit. There you go.
Great. Yeah,
so why the heck would you not collaborate? Okay, thank you, Ian. That's really helpful. One other question at the moment. Where the contractor proposes a change to the scope which changes our design, who then does the design liability lie with if the proposal fails to work? You're looking at me now, aren't you?
Yes.
Let's move on then. So next slide, I think.
I'm a simple accountant. Whoever else I apologise, I'm a simple accountant. That's beyond my...
Simple accountant. Is there such a thing?
Yeah. I think it's axiomatic. Another area which NEC4 seeks to, the most obvious area, I guess, is the new alliance contract, and this is following what's actually happening out, I think, in our world. And within the alliance contract, which is a draft document at the moment, I think NEC's been asking for consultations on the whole thing. But what it seeks to do in the draft is that all parties will sign up to one contract, and it will be risk and reward based for the achievement of the alliance objectives, and everybody will work together as an integrated team, and all alliance members are engaged on an open book basis with project specific incentives. So it's everybody working together to a common goal, which is the essence of collaboration. The interesting thing about this, I think, is that it's trying to blur relationships to create this one team approach.
Yeah. To
the extent that I don't think there's a formal dispute resolution process within the alliance contract draft. So the assumption is that you won't need one. So,
effectively, there's no sue clause thinking in there, isn't there? So, but for criminality, I suppose, or bad faith or something like that.
Yes. Absolutely.
This is how it's going to be, and we won't sue each other for negligence or breach of contract or all of that. Okay.
But alliance is obviously at the far end of collaboration, meaning that when we got involved as a business in Terminal 5, for example, there were people in the alliance there signing off the invoices of the companies that they worked for. There's a complete sort of trust that they would take an objective view.
Yeah, I hear people that use the word alliance quite a lot. I think there's different opinions on the degrees of alliance that people do or should do or wish to do. But,
yeah.
Okay, just say that the consultation period is closed on that, the NEC4 alliance contract. That was 30th of November, and sometime in 2018, which gives us maximum latitude. The NEC4 alliance contract, no doubt, will be in a bookshop near you. Okay.
So. Those are just some examples of where I think NEC4 has sought to enhance collaboration and place emphasis on the need for collaboration, provide measures to kind of drive that sort of behaviour. Another element within NEC4 is trust. So it's very difficult to collaborate if you don't trust the other party. So I think the NEC has taken direct measures aimed at building trust in order to support that collaborative approach. And I've picked out 2 or 3 of them here, which I thought it'd be useful to actually just quickly go through. So before we actually get into NEC, how do you build trust? I mean, what does it mean in practice? And I think part of building trust is being reliable, is doing what you're saying you're going to do. I mean, I've got some examples. I looked at a survey of the UK's most trusted brands, the big department stores like John Lewis, you've got Sony, Amazon, Heinz and Boots and people like that. And there's no drama with these organisations, not particularly exciting necessarily. They're predictable and reliable, but they are the most trusted brands. And I thought of, well, what would be the sort of other side of that? And I thought of the poor old Lib Dems for the 2010 election, where they came up with a manifesto promise to not increase tuition fees, and then 27 of them voted in the Alliance for the Conservatives to actually increase those fees. There was an interesting quote at the time from one of the senior Lib Dems that said, "Trust for me is critically important, and that debacle massively undermines people's trust in the party." So they didn't say what they were going to do, so that undermines trust. So I think being reliable is a core element of trust, if you like.
Okay, all the companies you mentioned, they'll pay corporation tax, I take it?
I've no idea. I wouldn't like to comment on that.
You're an accountant, you know everything about it.
I'm not that sort of accountant. Okay. The other side of this then is dealing with problems. How do you actually address problems? If going back to the point, if things go wrong, the way you address those problems is about dealt with truthfully and directly, I think that helps to build trust as well. Again, another little example, when I'm not worrying about NEC contracts, I like to strum a guitar and make some horrible noises. And I can
vouch that they are horrible.
Not intentionally, so yeah. But I went to a guitar shop, I saved up my pennies and went to this guitar shop, bought a wonderful guitar for £1,300. Following Monday, a couple of days after, I got an email saying, oh, they're on sale for £999, which upset me greatly. It was £301 too much, I thought. So I went to the website to check. And you get these little pop-ups that appear in the corner. The guy said, hi, sir, can I help you today? I said, you bloody can. And I real go at him. Within 10 minutes, they'd refunded me the difference.
That's fantastic.
This British was really good.
So you go back again?
Absolutely. Every other guitar I buy, and to make different variations of unpleasant noises, I'll go back to them. So there was an issue there, but they dealt with it really, really well. And it increased my trust in them rather than actually undermined it, even though something went wrong.
So just as an aside, so what you said there is you found an organisation with whom you trust, who would like to go back and place more transactions in the future, which is directly opposite to how we engage many a contractor and consultant in the industry, particularly in the public sector. Absolutely. Where we have to throw away the past, and that fabulous relationship that we've built up potentially all gets thrown in the dustbin, and we start it all again. So actually we're not using some of these principles actually to improve our industry, because we just knock it down the team, build it up again.
I mean, this is what we're talking about today is all on the basis of a contract. But you're right, I mean, trust builds up over a period of time.
Yeah.
I mean, the other side of that is, I mean, thinking about United Airlines, you remember there was that Kentucky doctor who was dragged off of an aeroplane, lost some of his teeth, was beaten up, and the chief executive came out afterwards and said he was very disruptive and he was belligerent, and he actually apologised for overbooking the aeroplane rather than this poor soul who was physically damaged by the whole thing. So there was an issue, and they dealt with it really badly, and it rebounded on them. So lots of petitions saying get rid of them, and a massive dip in
share price.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was 1.3 billion reduction in the value of the company.
Really?
Because of that, yeah. Huge. So again, it was an issue. It was something that went wrong, but it dealt with it really badly. So, dealing with issues, and also the last point without labelling it is honesty. So those are the sort of bulwarks, if you like, of trust. So moving on to the next one.
Sure.
So just a thought, and this is a scientific diagram which is built up over a good 2 or 3 minutes of PowerPoint.
As long as that, you think?
No, probably not actually. But my experience of this, I think I spoke to the guys in my organisation about this, and they made this point quite strongly, that this trust can erode over time. I think, Rob, you made a good point that it takes a while to build up. So the diagram
you don't just start. Well, there's a gap there, isn't there? I'll give you a benefit. Between contract signing and the first one, there's a little gap. Yeah. So it takes a little bit of time to get to the point that you trust somebody.
But there's that intention. I think when something's shiny and new, when the parties come to a contract, they're basically in a position where
there's an expectation.
Yes.
There's an you do what you've got to do, and I'll do what I'm going to do. And if you don't have that expectation and that trust, that's just pure madness, isn't it?
Well, you don't have a starting point for a collaborative relationship. But what we've found is quite often over time is that relationship can erode. And so a couple of examples, and we got involved in a big £500 million job once where the contractor had a difficult commercial position, so employed a load of claims consultants to start raising change orders to try and improve their position. We also worked with one of our clients, unfortunately, who was trying to sort of get money back at the end of a job. They basically went to contractors at the end of this thing and said, right, okay, if you don't want to work for us again, I'm afraid you're going to have to pay me £10 million, whatever. So all of that, the actions of the parties can erode trust, and you see that sort of stuff going on. And it's not uncommon, unfortunately.
Interesting. Okay, so ethics is a big keen sort of popular theme of mine at the moment. So that's a question. A number of these things touch on the principles of ethics, but we'll come back to that a little bit later.
Yeah. So what I thought about then was, well, what is NEC4 doing to enhance trust, which is this sort of the support, if you like, for a collaborative approach? And I think it's interesting that the old 10.1 talked about the parties and the project manager and the supervisor act in a spirit of mutual trust and cooperation. It just said that. But the new 10.1 is that the parties, the project manager and the supervisor, shall act as stated in the contract. So going back to my sort of analysis of what reads trust, it's actually doing what you said you would do. So it's doing what it says in the contract. And, you know, we've seen examples where NEC is being used, and the old 10.1, the spirit of mutual trust and cooperation, was used as an excuse for saying, well, I'll forget about the contract, you know, we trust each other, we'll just sort this out. And any contractor who was sort of seen to be wanting to enforce the contract, it was difficult, they were being contractual, which was seen as a bad thing. But I think, particularly with these contracts, they need to be living documents and complied with, basically.
Yeah, I have seen that myself, where there was a project manager giving verbal instructions. They can't do that anyway because they're not permitted under the contract. But this person was giving verbal instructions and saying, under clause 10.1, you can trust me. So
yeah,
and
absolutely.
The contract said, well, funnily enough, no, I don't. And I don't blame them, to be honest. Yeah. Why? Because this person was actually trying to change the works information which they drafted, and they drafted quite poorly. So I think they're trying to change the works information to make it correct at the contractor's expense wherever possible. So we're a million miles away from both collaboration and trust there.
Well, it's an unfortunate behaviour to say, well, look, trust me, because it says that.
Trust me, I'm a doctor. That's what I'm told, isn't it? Really?
But the rejoinder is, well, it's driving somebody to say, well, no, I don't trust you because I trust. So it's not really driving collaboration. So I think applying the contract, the importance of that to trust shouldn't be undermined. And applying the contract doesn't imply a lack of trust. What it does is drive good project management. And it drives trust and collaboration because you're doing what you said you were going to do. And I think that's what this change to 10.1 is actually sort of starting to do.
Okay, doing what you said you were going to do. And again, draw back on my early days in construction, where I was told, keep the contract in the drawer, only take it out if you're going to roll it up and smack the contractor over the head with, you know, effectively. Yeah. So, you know, and every time we did get the contract out, somebody said, oh, you're being contractual. So
exactly.
You're saying the complete opposite, really. So,
well, contractual is a pejorative term, isn't it? Something, oh, this person's being contractual.
What was that word?
Pejorative.
Okay. Anybody spell that? Anyway, okay.
I don't know where that came from.
No, that's quite impressive. I'll have a look later. I'll pretend as if I know what it means now and look it up later. Wikipedia, though.
It's an insult to say you are being contractual.
Yeah.
Whereas in actual fact, it's doing what you said you would do. It's the basis for trust. If you're doing something else, I mean, quite often when we do audits, you go to ask somebody why they've done something straight beyond the contract and say, oh no, we agreed that with whoever.
Who's now moved on.
Whoever doesn't exist anymore. They've got no audit trail for this conversation. There's no formal and a change of the contract or even an email. So
I've heard very difficult. Similar horror stories where a good few years after the job's finished, people have moved on, and they've still got some sort of problem, and it surfaces enough. They go to adjudication, and the client contractor looks around and say, "Who am I going to get here to actually give evidence, to explain something?" Absolutely. All gone. Okay.
So just some other points in here which I think are aimed at trust, and getting people to do what they said they would do under the contract. So interesting new clauses around cost certainty. So under CD, E and F, a contractor can ask the PM to review and either accept his total defined cost or explain the problems. So there's this opportunity for the contractor to go forward and say, okay, are you okay with this? If not, the PM basically has to come back with any issues. If they don't do that within 13 weeks, then the defined cost will deem to be accepted.
Okay, so if they do nothing, 13 weeks later, they're deemed to be accepted.
Yeah, so basically it's like a sort of interim assessment of some kind, I guess.
But it closes down that period. That period could be a quarter of a financial year, half, or a whole financial year.
Cost date, I would imagine. Yeah. Now, I think the rationale behind this is to avoid the sort of behaviours which we've seen on a number of occasions, where you've got an army of checklists coming in late on in the contract, and the clients put them in place, sometimes with a no-win, no-fee type arrangement, to say, well, find me some issues, see if you can drive down these costs. Now, to me, in a collaborative partnering relationship like an option C contract, no win, no fee has no place, because what it's saying is, do what you can, Phil, to screw Rob over and get as much cash out of them as you possibly can. And what that means is that I will find issues, whether these issues will stick or not.
Well, you won't get paid if you don't, because you're on a percentage. So.
Exactly, but I'll put as much as I possibly can on the table in the hope that there'll be some kind of commercial agreement at the end of it. So that kind of behaviour is not in line with a collaborative approach. It's not a partnering approach. It's something that sort of steps beyond that. It's one of those actions which kind of moves away from that relationship.
It's perfectly legal, though, isn't it? We're not saying it's illegal. We're just saying, well, I would suggest it's probably immoral. I would suggest it's also unethical. Certainly, the no win, no fee people. Sure, there's ethics at stake there, aren't there? That you're going in to do a job based upon a percentage of problems that you find, so you're motivated to find problems, or else you don't get a fee. Are you going to act in the best interest of the clients at that point? I'm not sure.
Well, the project manager has to act in an open-handed and even-handed way in assessing the amounts due to the contractor. So, going down this approach to see how much we can screw out is obviously not in line with that approach. I mean, there is absolutely nothing wrong with going out, and it's important that clients, project managers take assurance around defined costs. That's fine, but I think what we talked about here undermines the contractor's margins potentially. I mean, if this is a long-term project which has been going on for a couple of years, for example, then they will have traded those margins. They'll have told head office that we're making this amount of money. So when you come in at the last knockings of the contract to try and claw this money back, it could end up in dispute. It will end up in some kind of fight.
But the argument could be, yeah, but I'm vindicated because I did find problems, and those problems are here, and they're real problems.
But then the issue then is that if you were operating the contract properly, those problems should have been found significant.
So that's the point, it's the timing, isn't it? So there may well be problems, but it's when you set about trying to avoid or fix those problems that's the important bit.
When we started our business off, clients used to love us for finding a lot of money. So you go and you look at some costs and say, oh, blimey, look, contractors overcharged by £2 million. Now I think we see that as a failure. So if there's a £2 million overcharge, then that destroys the relationship potentially. Much better to be involved early and to actually prevent these sort of issues happening in the first place.
Well, both parties got time to do something about it then. So the sudden costs that weren't expected, or the costs on the table that shouldn't have been asked for and should be disallowed, let's say, if you're lucky, you have a little bit of time to do something about it one way or the other.
Absolutely.
Whereas right at the 11th hour, well, it's tough, isn't it? Fait accompli at that point.
I think also that clients who do this sort of thing, do this army of checkers coming in at the last minute, what they do is they drive future behaviours as well.
Yeah.
So clients will get a reputation so that when contractors come to work with them to bid for work, they will price that. There will be a risk in there. So ultimately, there will be potential future ramifications. Okay. My thought on that clause, just for what it's worth, is that the good clients, the ones who are actually operating the project well, will be finding these issues as they go along. So they'll be operating good project management. So I don't think the contractor will ever need to actually invoke this clause. So it just becomes unnecessary. The bad, if you like, are the ones who don't want to work collaboratively. We will just clause it out.
Okay, or there's a deterioration of trust, and therefore the contractor gets a little bit nervous and perhaps uses this clause defensively, just in case, to lock down some defined cost. Okay, interesting.
On a similar line, under NEC4, the project manager issues a final assessment within 4 weeks of the issue of the defect certificate. Now, if they fail to do that, the contractor can do that. So in his place, he can issue a final assessment. Now, if the PM does nothing, it's not challenged within 4 weeks, then that final assessment will stand. So it's a similar kind of deemed acceptance process on final assessment.
My thought here is that why would the project manager fail to issue that final assessment? That's what you're paid to do, isn't it? So if you can't or won't, then why are you acting in that role? Or did you ever take that?
Well, it's interesting how many clients have difficulties in actually closing down contracts.
That's not the client's problem, that's the project manager's problem. Yeah, the client has an expectation that the parties will do that which they signed up to do, and that is the project manager issuing that final certificate by the day that they're supposed to.
Absolutely. As a sort of on those two particular clauses, I think it's interesting that, you know, entering into a relationship, if these are Z claused out of a contract,
Yeah.
I think that sends a little signal to whoever you're working with to say, well, actually, you know, are we going to walk the talk on this? Because
I would agree.
Explode.
So I asked people to look at that. It's a little ding-ling sort of moment.
Yes.
Say, that's interesting. You know, maybe we shouldn't be bidding for this after all, or maybe you bid high, or maybe you bid low if they leave the provisions as are. So it is. It's an indication, isn't it? It's an indication of the likely behaviour, approach, mindset, attitude that you're letting yourself in for.
But I do think these the clauses we've spoken there about are about building trust that the project manager will abide by what the contract requires. So doing what you said you would do. Similarly, there's a clause now where the project manager has 2 weeks to accept or not accept a submitted program as ever. And if they don't respond, then the contractor can notify the PM of the failure. And if that continues for a further week, which is not a lot of time, then the program is deemed to be accepted. So again, what it's doing is to say, let's build trust by getting parties to do what they said they would do within the contract. Yeah. And I think this is an important one, because without an accepted program, then, for example, change becomes an issue. Well, is it a change or isn't it? Does it have an impact on the program or not?
Yeah, the interest to me is lots of contract practitioners look at these words and say, oh, that'll drive this behaviour or have this effect, or I do like this or I don't like it. And you look at it from a completely different perspective of building or not trust between the parties.
Absolutely. Well, I think, you know, this whole world of the contract is the foundation for the collaborative approach, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's the first element, if you like. I think what I wanted to do then was just to talk a little bit about assurance and how assurance can help support collaboration by enhancing confidence and building trust.
Okay, so can I ask what you mean by assurance here from a client's perspective, or both parties, or from
both parties? Because I think for it to be meaningful in a collaborative relationship, it needs to make sense to both parties, so that I am, as a contractor, I have enhanced confidence that I will get paid on time and what I expect to be paid. So when I submit a payment, I will be paid. I have enhanced confidence that, for example, change will be dealt with in an even-handed way, and you know, I'll get a reasonable assessment.
So assurance of the different aspects of the contract, so it can be payment or I don't know, notification of defects, that each party has done that which they promised they would do.
Absolutely. Okay. So assurance is a word which is bandied around but very little understood, I think. It's about enhancing confidence. It's all about enhancing confidence of one party about another. So I just put some examples of, you know, these aren't strictly, in some cases, assurance, but they give an idea. So, for example, if you need your gutters cleaned,
yes, please. Come down.
I wouldn't trust me to do it, but what you might do is go to a third-party site. You know, one of these things that you can check out the previous work. So it's a third party to enhance my confidence, or your confidence, that I'm going to do a good job on your gutters. If you're buying a car, you might want to check that it's got no previous write-offs or outstanding HP and so on.
I did buy once a car that was stuck together.
Did you really?
One of those.
How did you find out?
That it was stuck together because the bonnet, the paintwork on the bonnet deteriorated, so I took it back to a certain name supplier, nameless, and they said that's because it's a poor respray. Your cars are cut and shit things. So that was not good. Lost a lot of money on that. Don't buy cars. Don't buy it. But thank you.
So it's very interesting, little Johnny or Jenny, to see. Just go away with that. So,
improvisation, that's called.
So, to see a film, you want to make sure it's suitable for them. Then there's a third-party body which watches these things and applies these classifications and certificates. The last three are more germane. I think these are real examples of assurance. So what's happening here is, if you want to look at a school and understand how good it is, if you want to look at a care home, understand how reliable it is, and whether you can rely on a set of financial accounts, then in all these instances, a third party is in place to go as experts to look and to provide an opinion. So Ofsted will do an inspection, and they will use, their experts, their educationalists, whatever. They can spot and see what's going on. They use a methodology and come back with an agreed assessment. A set of financial accounts, which is subject to audit. There is a whole process and a whole sort of professional background to financial audit, which supports methodologies which financial auditors do to provide place an opinion on a set of numbers, to say, can you rely on these numbers in your decisions when you look at whatever the accounts.
So that's the point of company accounts. That's the process in company accounts.
It's to provide assurance. So look, when you're investing your millions, you can look at a set of accounts and say, well, I want to invest in this company. It's got a big profit margin. Is that true?
Yeah, these are Vietnamese dang millions. By the way.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so who checks the checkers then? So who?
Well, I can't. The ones above, I can tell you that as financial, we're a chartered accounting practice, so we are checked by the Institute of Chartered Accountants. So they do quality assurance reviews of us, and we are also BSI accredited. So we've got quality systems around those. So I'm sure the Care Quality Commission also has
similar thing. So again, it's safeguarding, isn't it? So
yeah, it's reliable assurance. I mean, I could go along and give assurance over, building regulation, but it would mean nothing. I wouldn't know what I was talking about. So it's making sure that you have the competence to do those things.
Okay.
So the facets, if you like, what are the common features of assurance? Well, the first one is it needs to be delivered by somebody independent of the two parties. So someone or some organisation which can say and give an opinion without any sort of fear of being constrained. So if I was reporting on how good the Orange Partnership is, for example, you wouldn't believe me because I'm not independent. How marvellous we are.
You're smiling, you can't say it with a straight face.
I know, right? So, I can't be independent, frankly. You wouldn't judge me. So it's being independent, but also being seen to be independent.
Yeah.
It's also having a level of expertise to be able to deliver that assurance. My example of the building regulation or health and safety, I wouldn't have a clue. But as a chartered accountant, I know how to audit numbers. And, you mentioned the ethical side to that.
Yeah.
We have a duty of care as a profession to be competent in what we do.
Yeah, definitely. So integrity, truthfulness, duty of care, all those things, all ethics sits across all of this.
Absolutely. The other feature of assurance is it has to offer an opinion. You have to know what it's saying. So if quite often I hear organisations say, "Oh, we've got a load of assurance going on." I say, "Well, what's it telling you?" Well, I don't know. It's just loads of people ticking and bashing and checking stuff, but not really much comes out.
So what you're saying, you have to be in a position to offer an opinion, to say to somebody to be as definitive as you can.
Yeah. I mean,
to say assurance, I can give assurance that.
Yes, and what that opinion would normally be would be everything's fine or it's not fine. These are the issues that need to be sorted out.
Okay.
So assurance doesn't imply that everything's working well. What it's saying is that, well, yeah, this bit's okay, but another bit may not be working well, but it needs to then deliver some kind of action plan to say let's deal with those problems.
Well, not maybe. Maybe the issue is fairly minor. Okay, they've gone off piste, if you like, but so what? In the scheme of things,
absolutely,
we can live with it. So
but it's providing transparency and the ability to take a decision.
Okay, and they can close the audit trail down by saying, well, notice this is wrong, but we didn't fix it because, and it's sort of closed.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. But the whole purpose of insurance is to enhance confidence. So it's for you as an individual or as an organisation to feel confident, more confident that contracts being complied with, defined costs are being applied in line with the contract and so on, whatever it is. So I just thought it'd be useful to pick up some examples of where assurance could be effective under an NEC4 style contract. And I thought the most obvious one would be the alliance contract, because we're asking people to trust each other, which is great. But if something's going wrong underneath, it could be that it's not a deliberate thing. It could be that there's just something going wrong with the process, or somebody doesn't understand what they should be doing, or it's as much cock up as conspiracy, but it has the same effect, if you like. So under an alliance contract, where you're sort of basing this sort of total trust on your partners, having a third party, for example, looking at compliance with the schedule of cost components, as everybody's got open book arrangements, so somebody standing back from all of those parties, may be paid for by all of those parties, looking at that schedule of cost components and saying, yeah, you're all charging in line with the contract, or actually there's some uncertainty because you put a Z clause in place here, which we don't really understand. What was the common intent of that? So, and obviously supported by contractors, those kind of things. So having a third party in an alliance contract, I think, will do something to enhance confidence and trust in that collaborative approach.
So sometimes I question if you do, I use the word audit, it's probably the wrong audit, but if you do that sort of, whether it's a third party or not, then that can undermine trust. What do you think about that? That potentially this third party comes in. So what's happening here?
I think it depends on the third party. If you go back to if it's an independent expert organisation, so a cost consultant, it could be the internal audit department of an organisation. But what it needs to be is an organisation which is trusted or feels as if it can be relied on by all parties. So you know,
so hired hands of a certain of the client maybe we've not come across as having that sort of impartiality and independence.
No. And the example we were talking about earlier on about the mob of cost checkers coming into that's not going to enhance confidence.
No. Okay.
There's also you know, other areas potentially. I mean, I keep talking about cost, but contract compliance in general terms, it's useful to have that third party view, I think, stand back from it and say, well, how is this working? Are we doing what we said we were going to do? So for example, you know, an early warning process. You may say, well, I've got a nice bit of software in there that does this, in which case you think, well, probably not. I don't need assurance about this because the process is so strong and this piece of software is driving compliance that I don't need to worry about that. But if it was a more manual process, for example, you might say, well, it would be useful to have a third party looking at this to say, well, yeah, is this working in the way the contract suggests? Now, what we're talking about here are kind of substantive tests in the jargon. So these are saying, let's look at the sort of the transactions, if you like, what it is you're doing, how you're charging cost, how you're procuring subcontractors, and so on. But there is another way to look at assurance. So if we move on to the next slide, please.
Sure.
So typically you would say, for example, if I'm going to check costs or whatever, check EWNs, I would pick a sample. I'd pick a great big sample of these things and I'd check them and say, okay, right, have they been dealt with within the time frames? Is the right contractual mechanism being complied with? But there is another way, and the other way is to look at the effectiveness of processes and controls, so the things that sit behind these transactions. Probably an example might help. We're working on a big capital project at the moment, providing insurance over cost, and part of that is a multi-million labour cost. And one of the risks is, well, these operatives were never actually on site. So what we're looking to do is to provide enhanced confidence, assurance that they were on site, so we're testing. Now, one way to do that would be to pick 1,000 of them and check them back to timesheets and whatever. But what we've discovered is that our client has a nice process and control in place. So when the operatives come on site, they go on through a swipe system. The swipe system then goes back to the contractor who compares it with the timesheets, does an adjustment, and then charges on the basis of the time they're actually on site, which the client then checks. So what we're doing is looking at those processes, those controls, to say, and if they're working, I'm pretty confident I don't need to go and check over the timesheet. It doesn't make sense. So it's another way, if you like, of providing assurance. And I think it's a good way to do it because what it does is deal with the root causes of problems. So rather than finding the symptoms of problems, so, you know, suppose I do the transaction check on this and say, well, okay, I've found lots of time being charged which isn't being worked. Well, the question is, well, why? What's going on? Whereas if I'm looking at the whole process, then I'm more likely to find that.
So, so I would say this is about sort of nipping things in the bud, if you like.
Yeah, exactly that.
So rather than wait for things to pop out the other end and then have an argument over it, to making things, making sure people are doing the right things at the right time they should be doing.
Absolutely. So a couple more examples on there. Contract awareness. That's a good thing to do, sort of, if you like, process control effectively.
What do people know?
Yeah.
To the contract.
Have
you even read it? Which I still find occasionally, people, people actually haven't got a copy of the contract, and yet they're
that's the first question.
Where's your contract? What are the Z clauses, for example?
The first question we ask when we do this kind of thing is, can you show me a copy of the contract?
Yeah.
And you go and say, oh, well, yeah, well, I think it was in the draft. Yeah. Have you got my copy?
I've possibly never even read it or had training or anything like that. So.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Speed up, says Silvana at this point.
So the benefit, I mean, we're nearly there, I think, but the benefits of effective assurance, how this builds on what NEC is trying to do, if you like, to enhance collaboration, are that they head off problems, as you said, nipping it in the bud. So if you've got a third party, independent expert organisation looking and saying, well, you've got an issue here, if you do that on a timely basis, then it's going to head things off. Then you're going to sort them out before they become major issues, which could then create a potential schism in the relationship. I think also what it does is, if it identifies an issue, it enables the parties to deal with that in an open and honest way.
Yeah, if it's wrong, isn't it? So.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, it's about assisting the parties to do what they said they would do. So last slide, basically. This is what I've got all arty will be like this.
Okay, some graphics.
So I think, to work collaboratively, the foundation of a collaborative relationship is the contract. So doing what you said you would do in the contract, which I think is enhanced by what NEC4 does. I think there are some useful measures in there to increase trust and collaboration. But then I think the bricks, if you like, the superstructure, are the actions of the party. So it's how they operate the contract and how they work together in that. And my argument is that the mortar, the cement, the assurance activities which can help to bring that all together.
Is it mortar or cement between the rings?
I go back to my simple accounting line, I'm afraid.
Okay. So do you think over time that would be more slender, the mortar? Do you think? I think over the initiative process.
I think over the course of a programme, I mean, I've heard this said that you won't get to a point where you don't need assurance. It could be the case, but more likely the risk profile of the project will change over time. Yeah. So, at the early days of a contract, it's mobilizing resources, procurement, getting subcontractors up and running, whatever, which presents a certain set of risks. And you've got the delivery, and then you're into final assessment and handover, which give different sets of risks. So I think assurance should be there all the time, but its focus will be different over the course of the thing.
Okay, excellent. So Q&A. Sorry, this time I didn't pick up questions as we went along, did I? So let's pick out a few. The success of working collaboratively is often down to the individuals involved, not the organisations. Yeah. So how would that sit with assurance? So you get some brilliant individuals maybe in conflict with what their organisations ask of them.
I've seen it. There is I won't say who the client was, but we had a collaborative relationship where the FD of the organisation, the client, who was my boss at the time, produced a paper to say that all the contractors were at it and demonstrated that, well, this is what they're doing. And this was in a very collaborative relationship that was trying to be built. And the contractor then spent an awful lot of time preparing paperwork and justification as to why it wasn't acting in that way. And I think they were right. But basically what that showed, I think, was a failure of the management team on the client side, if you like, to actually come up with a common set of behaviours. And there was a missing tone from the top.
Right.
But I do think the question is absolutely right. It's down to the individual.
Yeah.
But so I think it's really, it's holding people to account again. It's saying what you said you would do in the contract.
Yeah. Okay. Will these slides be available? Yes, they will. What are the issues that most likely threaten collaboration, and how is NEC4 designed to head these off?
Surprises, I think, are the big one. So it's actually sort of...
So surprises are the biggest threat to collaboration.
Yeah. So if I am a contractor and I come back and say, my expected outturn cost has gone up £1 million this month, and you went £1 million up last month,
Yeah.
then I think that's the kind of stuff where everybody starts to feel uneasy and think, well, are we in control?
Even though we encourage those to be disclosed, don't we, through the early warning process, tell me about those surprises, but they still, in themselves, when they happen, can undermine collaboration. But we're not saying don't surprise people. Do surprise people if you have to surprise people at the appropriate time.
Absolutely.
Don't hold these things back, because it will cause an even bigger problem if you hold back giving information. But surprises are the ones that undermine collaboration.
What NEC4 does, I think, is try and deliver good project management to avoid these issues popping out in the woodwork.
Yeah, so a combination, certainly for the cost-based options, combination of the early warning process, I would say, and also the regular forecasting from the contractor of their opinion of what they think defined costs will be. Yeah. These things are designed to give us that information early doors to do something about it. Okay, a few more. My understanding is that the NEC PM is managing a lot of assurance activities throughout the contracts. What about if the client wants to appoint their own project manager on one part of the project and appoint a PSC consultant for the other part of the contract, given a single contractor for both jobs? The drive is to save money. What's your opinion? Did you get the question?
No, I was going to say you have to break it down a bit.
Blimey. My understanding, no, not quite like that, you know. Break it down. Okay, my understanding. So you got an NEC project manager managing a lot of assurance, fine. But if you get a client who appoints their own PM on one part of the project and a professional services consultant on another, so you've got a single contractor, but you've got effectively two project managers. I'm not sure how they cut the cake between them, but that's probably the drive this person mentioned was to save money. What's your opinion there? So you've now got two people acting as project manager, but you could have more than one person, of course.
Oh, I mean, we see a lot of the clients who have, you know, contractors delivering multiple projects with multiple PMs and a mix of third-party PMs and in-house PMs.
So go back to what we were saying earlier. If they're doing the job properly, so what?
Do what the contract says you should do, basically. But I think there are the challenge there. I think is when there are uncertainties or things which are unclear. You know, supposing that our questioner has looking at a contract with Z clauses in it which undermine potentially a clause, then having a common view across that project manager body is really important, so that somebody doesn't set a precedent which is not sort of supported by the others, but you've got this consistent view across everybody.
Okay. So I can't speak for the for the private sector, but the public sector has a requirement to demonstrate public funds are being spent appropriately. Part of the strategy are QA audits at the end of the project. The driver is not to claw back. Yeah. It's more of a statement, I suppose, than a question.
I think that's, I've seen this in public sector organisations. It's a great way to go. The only slight concern is at the end of the project. And at the end of the project, I mean, I know the objective of the audit might be to sort of close out to learn lessons, but I think assurance through the project is very important to avoid things.
Okay, so do this, but it's when you do it, going back to that, when you do it that needs a little bit of work. To do it at the end undermines like trust and is not collaborative.
Well, also you can't fix the problem.
And it's too late, isn't it? As you said, it's now a fait accompli, isn't it? It's gone. The time has passed for us to do something about that surprise that is the thing that's causing the problems with collaboration. Okay, let's see if I can find one more. What's that? 5-2. The volume has dropped. That was a bit earlier on, wasn't it? Something like that. Who and where we will draw a line for mutual trust as each party is acting in the best interest of their organisation.
I don't think they are mutually exclusive. I think acting in the best interest of your organisation doesn't preclude you from working in mutual trust. I think it implies a compromise to say that both parties are meeting their objectives as best as they can under the arrangement. Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay, last question then. I was listening to some of what you were saying, but just like most of it. Just wondering, in terms of your explanation of eroding trust, the clients followed the contract, follow the contract, and they're asking for money back, if you like. Therefore, the claim is legitimised. We spoke about this earlier, didn't we? That I did this, but I did it late, and therefore I'm vindicated, and I should never have been paid it, and I've only found that out. What in this instance, what should the client do? So, if you got the timing wrong and you did the assurance at the end and you found a problem, you're okay with the client taking the money?
Oh, absolutely.
So it's not a problem. You're not saying don't do it.
No, not at all.
It's not missed a chance.
No.
There are just implications of when you should do it.
I think it's best to avoid that if you can, because that final assessment wash-up, don't leave it to the final assessment. Don't leave it to the end of the thing to actually put in place the commercial principles within the contract.
Okay, brilliant. Right, 1:57, time to wrap up. So there's a good few more questions that we didn't manage to get through in the next week or so. We'll issue the slides, the recording, and the questions and answers, or questions with answers that we didn't manage to go through today. So our next webinar involves Ian Heafy and John Hughesday, both of the NEC4 contract board members. So do ask them lots of questions, and their particular topic is how to avoid and resolve disputes under NEC4, and of course they'll be looking at things like options W1, 2 and 3 to achieve that. That is 21st of February, 1 o'clock in each meeting time, so have a look at that. There's a Christmas sale, wouldn't you know, NEC training, 10% off certain things. There's a code, Xmas 18. It should be Xmas 18, is that only Xmas 17? Maybe not. Okay, no feedback.
2018.
Okay, 2018. Okay, yeah, okay. There is some thought behind that then. So Xmas 18 is the code to get some savings off some future training. There is now in place the NEC3 to NEC4 ECC Project Manager Accreditation Extension. So those of you lucky enough, and there's lots of you to be accredited NEC3 Project Managers, please have a look at the website, nccontract.com, and /NEC4 training at the extensions. That's available in the UK and Hong Kong in January-ish, I believe, yes. So just enough. Christmas is coming. I plugged the last book last time, didn't I? This is a different book, NEC4 Practical Solutions, Mother-in-law, Father-in-law. Somebody would appreciate this, I'm sure. Two fine authors. Comments on the back. This is a stunner. Again, the ending is quite unexpected, but a great read, and other such comments. So have a look at the books and things like that. That's about it, I think, isn't it? So thank you very much indeed to Phil and the Orange Partnership. Thank you for your time again. And we will see you all at the next webinar. So have a smashing Christmas and see you then. Thank you. Goodbye.